I often find myself thinking a lot about Star Wars, partly because it's a huge franchise in cinema, which of course I'm obsessed with, that tells an awesome galactic scale story of love, war, power, corruption, and morality. But mostly it's because I'm a giant dork, virgin with no mate. The interesting thing about the original Star Wars trilogy to me is the tone. The story that follows across the whole trilogy is of a small group of, misfits overcoming seemingly insurmountable odds against the forces of evil. And all they have to keep themselves going were their relentless optimism and hope. The first film, being literally titled A New Hope, really makes the themes pretty clear for the viewers. George Lucas has never been one for subtlety, I guess. Then you've got a story in the third film about the forces of good rising up and maintaining the fight against moral evil. Yet, fifth film always seemed out of place thematically. Episodes 4 and 6 are upbeat, optimistic and hopeful, but episode 5 is quite dark and somber and almost depressing, especially for a Star Wars film. We find the main protagonist stuck in the harshest conditions you can imagine. Supplies and morale are at breaking point, seemingly on the edge of certain annihilation from the Empire, despite the highs they finished the first film on. One of our heroes is frozen, another is enslaved, and the third is wounded and presumed dead. So why does this film, the dark and depressing, almost war film, belong in this franchise that's upbeat and sort of seems like it's more for kids and young adults? And my real question is, why is this film pretty unanimously considered to be the best in the franchise? And this doesn't just relate to Star Wars. Why are all these dark films always held in such high regard, especially compared to their more upbeat counterparts within the genre that they're in? The question is this: despite all the happiness in cinema and all the optimism we put onto ourselves and each other, why do we love bad endings? David Fincher is famous for making films that have dark and gritty themes and subject matter. Stories like The Killer, Gone Girl, and The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo are all exceptionally dark tonally, some of the darkest films you could see in mainstream cinema. But one film always stood out to me as his darkest. That movie is Seven. Everything about this film is bleak. The weather, the audio, the dialogue, and Fincher even toned down his use of his iconic yellow just for this film, leaving most shots in just a depressing shade of grey. This of course works brilliantly with the film thematically, as the film is centred around a string of murders, all themed around a specific moral sin. Eventually the killer turns himself in, and the scenes that follow flesh out the missing pieces of the story, and takes us to one of the most iconic bad endings of all time. Mills receives a package from the killer, and he keeps asking the same question.
What's in the box?
Not till you give me the
What's in
gun.
the fucking box?
And he receives his answer. He experiences all 5 stages of grief in a matter of a few moments. Then he looks in the box, and he makes the decision in that moment. The final shot, we see Mills sat in the back of a police car, in the pouring rain, like there always is, with a 1,000-yard stare on his face. Then Detective Somerset quotes Ernest Hemingway.
Ernest Hemingway once wrote, "The world is a fine place and worth fighting for." I agree with the second part.
Cut to black, roll credits. This ending is gut-wrenching. It's shocking, it's depressing, it's not right. The overwhelming response from the audience, though? Masterpiece. It's a critical and audience smash. Why? Simple. Movies don't end this way. Seeing a film have such a stark contrast to almost all other films of the time is innately memorable. I remember the first time I watched Seven, and that was over 10 years ago. I thought about that ending for days afterwards. How can that be how it ends? No cliffhanger for a sequel, no catharsis, no justice. And that's why it's perfect. Sometimes in life we have bad days. We experience things with no reasons that make us furious, sad, confused, all of the above. And in life there is rarely meaning to it. When you watch a happy ending, the hero gets the girl, gets the job done, and walks off into the sunset. They beat you. They have happiness that you may not currently be feeling. It's not that easy in life, yet it always is for these characters. They always just, switch up in the third act and fix everything instantly and walk away with the prize. Sometimes the good guys lose, and sometimes the bad guys win. The Germans, pretty iconic bad guys, have a word for this feeling. Schadenfreude. Feeling of pleasure from someone else's misfortune. And we're not just happy because they aren't, it's because it provides us with perspective. Yeah, you may not be where you want to be, but you still have love. You still have someone in your life that cares about you, and there is someone, and at least someone you know isn't in the box. Now let's take this back to Star Wars. Episode 5 does end with Luke losing his arm, Leia in slavery, and Han trapped in carbon. But this story doesn't end there. There's another chapter. There's always hope. A new hope, you could say. Hope that the good will return at the Jedi. Again, George Lucas really isn't one for subtlety. Luke Skywalker is the most powerful person in the universe. They all say so. And he lost. And he lost bad. He lost so bad it would be hard for anyone to believe he could return. But you know who didn't lose hope? Luke Skywalker. That's why episode 5 is the best. Because it's necessary. You can't always win. And sometimes the best wins are the one you have to give the most for. Athletes who grow up in these wealthy, comfortable conditions with their whole livelihoods given to them by, family or circumstance, they rarely succeed. But those who push day in, day out, they make it. And they don't just make it, they make it to the top. Forever. Think about history. How many bad endings do you think Mike Tyson, or LeBron James, or Jay-Z, or Messi, or Muhammad Ali had in their lives? And you know what? It makes you appreciate the bad endings you had more because of what it ultimately led to. You may not be the same person you are now if it wasn't for your bad episodes, if it wasn't for your bad endings. The world may not be a fine place. Well, not all the time. But it is most definitely worth fighting for.